This is the Kershaw Rotary Lock 2100. It was introduced in 1979 and was discontinued in 1986. It was available through 1985, but you would not see this in the 1986 catalog. This knife was made in Seki, Japan. Let's see if the camera will focus here for us. There you see, by Kai, Japan, 2100. On the reverse we see Kershaw, Oregon, USA. Yeah, as I say, Seki, Japan was where this knife was made. Seki is also known as the City of Blades. They've been home to sword makers and knife makers for hundreds of years. Generally, knives coming out of Seki are top-notch in all respects. I'd say this Kershaw is proof of that. Kershaw for many years relied on external manufacturers for their designs. Kershaw was founded in 1974, and they were determined to make great knives, sell but great knives. So they pretty quickly established a relationship with Kai Cutlery of Japan. And I think it's fair to say by 1977, 1978, Kershaw had at least a strong dependency on Kai. The consensus view about Kai and Kershaw, and I don't know for certain that it's true, is that Kai bought Kershaw in 1978. In fact, if you look at the literature from that time period, we can look at the little catalog included in the box with the knife. You should be able to see here. This will focus. There you go, Kai Cutlery USA Limited. So that's pretty interesting. I could see why people might at least assume that Kershaw was a subsidiary of Kai. Even one of Kershaw's own catalogs from 2006, which talks about their history, has a timeline that agrees with the 1978 acquisition by Kai. Although Pete Kershaw, who founded the company, seems to have disputed this business narrative in at least one interview. According to him, his company was independent until 1985. And even though it's marked that this was made in Japan, and we know they had that relationship with Kai, there's some claims that the knives were assembled in Oregon from Japan-supplied blades and components, but I personally don't see that as very credible, especially given that Kershaw didn't have production facilities in the United States until 1986. So, in any event, they released some great knives, whether they were working with or under Kai, and this, I think, is a really terrific little knife. Now, what's special about this, as the name implies, is that this has a rotary lock. and you don't press on the spine. You don't have to grab the blade. In fact, there's no nail nick even on the blade, and it's not meant to be opened or closed that way. There's this brass wheel. You pinch the wheel, and you don't have to, only insofar as to get your grip. The pressure is not part of the locking mechanism, but then you simply twist the wheel, and that will close the blade up. And just in a similar fashion, twist the blade back out again, and a very firm click at the end. This is a drop point blade. It has a distal taper. Hopefully I can capture that here. Yeah, so this blade really thins out towards the tip, much like a sword even. It's full flat grind. A little ricasso here. I'm not sure you'd be choking up too much on this knife, and the finish, of course, as I'm sure it's coming through quite brightly, this is a mirror polish. Beautiful finish. Now the steel in this knife, in the 2100 series, was AUS stainless, Aus stainless. Depending on what generation of knife, there were a couple generations of this knife. Depending on which one you have, it would be either AUS 8, as is the case in this knife, or AUS 6. And regardless of 6 or 8, the knives were hardened to 57 HRC to 59 HRC. The specifications for this knife were approximately 2 ounces to 3 ounces, again depending on which generation you're talking about. Overall length on this particular knife is approximately 5.5 inches. I don't know if you guys can see that as well as I can, but take my word for it. There. And the next generation following this particular knife was slightly shorter. I'll put these specs up for you on the screen. Blade length. Look at this, maybe in centimeters might be a little better. About 6 centimeters. Handle length, of course, would be the same as the closed length, is on this about 8 centimeters. Blade thickness, let's measure that in centimeters. About 3 centimeters. I'm sorry, I meant millimeters. Yeah. Maybe just about 3 millimeters. And the blade height. Take that in metric as well. about 1.5 centimeters. The factory sharpening angle on this 2100 is about 15 degrees per side, 30 degrees inclusive. As I said earlier, the 2100 underwent some changes over time, so there are two generations, so to speak. The first generation is represented by this knife, and the knife of this generation would have been from 1979 to about 1981, and the next generation started in 1982 through 1985. This first generation is characterized by the brass wheel, which is approximately the same diameter as the width of the handle. Has this nickel silver handle with rosewood inserts and AUS 8 stainless steel. AUS 8A, in fact. The follow-on generation had natural white or brown Thailand water buffalo horn bone, and that was made with, the blade was made with AUS 6A stainless. Looked a little bit different than this. I'll throw up a picture for you guys of that. Personally, I think this is a little bit more attractive for my taste. Now, strangely, there are some seemingly authentic Kershaw Rotary Lock knives out there that appear to be first generation or second generation knives, but they're marked as models other than 2100. So, for example, you might see a knife that looks essentially identical to this, but it might be marked 2105, and you might see a knife corresponding to the second generation marked 2101. Now, Kershaw's catalogs don't make that distinction. They represent both this generation and the follow-on generation as model 2100. So that's odd. You know, the catalogs at that time frame, late 70s, early 80s, they show 2105, for instance, as the model number for a different Kershaw knife altogether, that being the little stud folder, which is not a rotary lock. So one might ask, are these other knives convincing counterfeits, or is that just a Kershaw quirk? Mystery to be solved there, perhaps. In any event, Kershaw described their rotary lock 2100 as a limited production, custom-made knife. It is quite rare. Perhaps it was always meant to be a collectible display of ingenuity. The knife certainly exhibits high production quality. It's very well made, and perhaps you could see even the interior components are polished. The action, if it does not translate through the video, I could describe as firm and smooth. A truly beautiful and interesting little folder. Very handsome knife. So that is the Kershaw Rotary Lock 2100. Thanks for watching.